The morning that changed everything. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small, bustling cafe on a chilly autumn morning. The chatter of customers mixed with the clinking of cups and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. It was an ordinary day in an ordinary town. Until it wasn't. At one of the corner tables, a man in his late 50s sat quietly, reviewing a few documents on his tablet. His name was James Carter. Though no one in the cafe would have recognized the name or his face, he had intentionally kept a low profile for decades, his career demanding it. As the director of the Federal Intelligence Bureau, James was used to blending into the background. Today, he wore a simple gray suit and a navy tie, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, and his expression serene despite the whirlwind of responsibilities waiting at his office. James often sought solace in small, out-of-the-way places like this. They offered a chance to sit, think, and sip his favorite beverage, black coffee, without the weight of his position pressing down on him. The coffee here wasn't remarkable, but the anonymity made it taste better. At the counter, Emma Lee, a waitress in her mid-20s, scurried back and forth, juggling orders and avoiding the glares of impatient customers. Her blonde hair was tied into a messy bun, strands escaping to frame her flushed face. She was new to the job and struggling to keep up with the morning rush. Plates clattered as she stumbled, and a few customers groaned when their orders were delayed. "Just breathe, Emma," she whispered to herself, her grip tightening around the coffee pot in her hand. Her nerves felt like frayed wires, sparking with every irritated glance sent her way. She had promised herself this would be a fresh start, a stable job to help pay off her debts. But today was already testing her resolve. As Emma approached James's table with a pot of coffee, he looked up and smiled warmly. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Could I trouble you for a refill?" Her hand hesitated mid-pour as her eyes met his. Something about his calm demeanor unnerved her. She was used to demanding, impatient customers, not someone who seemed so composed. Without a word, she nodded and poured his coffee, her hands trembling slightly. James noticed her unease but said nothing. He was well versed in reading people, an essential skill in his line of work, and Emma's body language spoke volumes. She was anxious, perhaps overwhelmed, and seemed to be carrying more than just the weight of her tray. As the morning rush continued, Emma grew more frazzled. A customer at another table berated her for bringing the wrong order. Her manager barked about cleaning up a spill, and the coffee machine sputtered as if mocking her efforts. Each small mishap chipped away at her composure. Then it happened. James had taken a sip of his coffee and was engrossed in an article on his tablet when Emma returned to his table. Her eyes were glassy with suppressed frustration, her grip on the coffee pot tight. She stared at him for a moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You people think you're so much better than everyone else," she muttered under her breath. James looked up, confused. "I'm sorry." Her voice rose, anger spilling out like the coffee in her pot. "Sitting there all calm and smug, like you own the world. You think we're just here to serve you, don't you?" "Miss," James began, his tone even, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." But Emma wasn't listening. Her frustration, humiliation, and resentment boiled over. Before she could stop herself, she tilted the pot forward, and steaming coffee splashed across James's face and chest. The cafe fell silent. Gasps echoed around the room as customers froze, watching the scene unfold. James's tablet slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table as he instinctively raised a hand to his face. The burning liquid dripped from his chin onto his suit, and his jaw tightened with the sting. Emma's eyes widened in horror as she realized what she had done. The coffee pot clattered to the floor, shattering into shards. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "I didn't mean to. James stood slowly, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. His expression was no longer one of pain but something colder, controlled fury. He reached for a napkin, dabbing at his face, and then fixed Emma with a piercing gaze. "You have no idea who I am," he said, his voice calm but laced with an authority that made the room seem smaller. Emma took a step back, her hands trembling. The cafe manager rushed over, his face red with anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking between James and Emma. "She threw coffee on me," James said simply, his tone measured but unwavering. "Hot coffee." The manager's jaw dropped as he took in James's appearance, his suit stained, his face reddened from the burn. "Emma," he barked. "What were you thinking? Get in the back, now." Emma stammered. I didn't mean." "Now," the manager repeated, his voice shaking with anger. Emma fled to the kitchen, leaving James standing at the center of the cafe, all eyes on him. He sighed, his expression softening slightly as he dabbed at his face again. "I am deeply sorry, sir," the manager said, his tone desperate. "We'll cover the cleaning and medical expenses. Please, let me make this right." James raised a hand to stop him. "No need for that," he said. "But I will need to address this. Excuse me." He turned and walked toward the restroom, his movements calm and deliberate. Behind him, the cafe erupted into murmurs as customers speculated about what had just happened. In the restroom, James splashed cold water on his face, soothing the sting of the burn. As he stared at his reflection in the mirror, his mind raced. The anger in Emma's outburst had been personal, almost visceral. It wasn't just stress. There was something deeper driving her actions. He dried his face and adjusted his tie, his composure returning. When he stepped out, the cafe was quieter, the tension still thick in the air. He returned to his table, where his phone buzzed with messages. Ignoring the concerned glances of the customers, he picked it up and dialed a number. "Agent Peterson," he said when the line connected. "I need a background check on an employee at a cafe on Maple Avenue. Name: Emily. Blonde, mid-20s. Send me everything you find." As he ended the call, James leaned back in his seat, his mind already piecing together the larger picture. This wasn't just about a cup of coffee. It was about something much deeper, something that needed to be understood before it could be resolved. The unseen battles. Back in the small kitchen of the cafe, Emma paced in frantic circles, her breathing uneven. The rush of adrenaline that had fueled her actions moments ago had evaporated, leaving behind a gnawing pit of regret. Her manager's voice echoed in her mind. "What were you thinking?" The truth was, Emma didn't know. Her co-worker, Leela, peeked in from the serving area. Leela, a shy barista with curly auburn hair, had watched the entire scene unfold from behind the counter. She hesitated before speaking. "Emma, are you okay?" Emma stopped pacing and looked at Leela, her hands trembling. "No, Leela, I'm not okay. I think I just ruined my life." Leela stepped closer, her voice soft. "What happened out there? I mean, why did you do that?" "I don't know." Emma snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. He looked at me, and something inside me snapped. I didn't even think. It's like I've been carrying all this weight, and he was the final straw. Leela hesitated, unsure how to respond. She'd worked with Emma for a few weeks now and had picked up on her simmering frustration, though they hadn't talked much about it. Emma was guarded, her personal life a mystery except for occasional mentions of overdue bills and her broken-down car. The manager stormed into the kitchen, his face red with anger. "Emma," he barked, "you're suspended. Effective immediately." Emma looked up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Wait. Please, I need this job." "No," he cut her off. "You assaulted a customer. Do you understand how serious this is? I don't know who that man is, but judging by his reaction, he's someone important. You've jeopardized this entire business." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She nodded numbly and grabbed her coat from the back hook. As she stepped outside, the cold wind hit her like a slap. She shivered, pulling her coat tighter around herself, and began the long walk back to her tiny apartment. Meanwhile, James Carter sat in his office at the Federal Intelligence Bureau's headquarters. He had spent the afternoon attending briefings and reviewing reports, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the incident at the cafe. His assistant, Agent Ramirez, knocked lightly before stepping in. "Director," Ramirez said, holding a file, "we have the information you requested on Emily." James motioned for him to enter, taking the folder Ramirez handed over. "What did you find?" James asked, opening it. "Emma Lee, age 26. Ramirez began, summarizing the report. "No criminal record. Graduated high school but didn't attend college. Has been working a string of low-paying jobs for the past 8 years. Financial struggles include overdue rent and significant medical debt. She's had a few altercations reported at previous jobs, but nothing major. Her social media shows a mix of frustration and isolation, mostly posts about feeling invisible or undervalued." James nodded as he read through the details. The picture painted was one of a young woman struggling against an unrelenting tide of challenges. He felt a twinge of sympathy, though it was tempered by the memory of the scalding coffee. "Anything that stands out?" James asked. Ramirez hesitated before responding. "She's been engaging with some concerning content online, groups that thrive on stoking resentment and anger. Nothing criminal, but it's clear she's influenced by them." James closed the file and leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "She's angry," he said quietly, "and she's been carrying that anger for a long time." "What's the next move?" Ramirez asked. James tapped his fingers on the desk. "I need to talk to her again. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what's happening to her. She's not the only one out there carrying this kind of weight, but I can do something about her situation. Let's arrange a meeting." That evening, Emma sat on the worn couch in her small apartment, staring blankly at the wall. The heat was out again, and she wrapped herself in a blanket to keep warm. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from her landlord, reminding her. Again, that rent was overdue. She groaned, tossing the phone onto the coffee table. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't afford to cry. Crying didn't solve anything. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She frowned, wondering who it could be at this hour. When she opened it, she found a man in a dark suit standing there. He was tall, with neatly combed hair and a stern expression. "Miss Lay?" he asked. Emma's stomach twisted. "Who's asking?" The man pulled out a badge, flashing it quickly. "Agent Ramirez. I work with Director Carter." Her eyes widened. "The man from the cafe." Ramirez nodded. "Director Carter would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. It's important." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of facing him again was mortifying, but something about Ramirez's tone told her this wasn't optional. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He handed her a card with an address and time printed neatly on it. "Be there. Don't be late." Before she could ask any questions, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, her hands trembling. She closed the door and sank onto the couch, staring at the card. Why would a man like him want to meet her? What could he possibly have to say? The next morning, Emma stood outside a sleek office building in the heart of the city. The address on the card had led her here, though she'd almost turned back twice. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, her boots echoing against the polished floors. A receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Miss Lay, Director Carter is expecting you. This way, please." Emma followed her down a long hallway lined with frosted glass doors. Her heart pounded with every step. Finally, they stopped in front of a large wooden door. The receptionist knocked lightly before opening it. "Miss Lay is here," she announced. James Carter looked up from his desk, his expression calm and unreadable. "Thank you," he said. "Please come in, Emma." Emma stepped inside, feeling small in the large, imposing office. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and a large window behind the desk offered a sweeping view of the city. She hesitated near the door, unsure if she should sit. "Have a seat," James said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. She obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched as James studied her, his gaze piercing but not unkind. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. Emma shook her head. I assume it's about what happened at the cafe." "That's part of it," James said, "but it's also about why it happened." Emma blinked, confused. "I don't understand." "You're angry," James said bluntly. "And not just at me. You're angry at the world, at your circumstances, at everything." That anger boiled over, and I happened to be the one standing in its path. Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." "I'm not here to punish you," he interrupted. "I'm here to understand, and maybe to help." Emma's eyes widened. "Help? Why would you want to help me after what I did?" James leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "Because I've seen too many people let anger consume them. It's a destructive path, Emma, and it doesn't just hurt others. It destroys you. But it doesn't have to be that way." Emma stared at him, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a faint flicker of hope. Could she really change? Did she even deserve to? "Tell me your story," James said. "Start from the beginning." Emma hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It's a long story," she said quietly. "I got time," James replied. "The cracks beneath the surface." Emma took a deep breath, steadying her trembling hands. The spacious office seemed to close in on her as James Carter waited, his calm demeanor unnerving. For a moment, she considered lying, giving him a sanitized version of her struggles, but something about his presence made it impossible to be anything but honest. "I grew up in a small town," she began, her voice shaky. "My dad left when I was 7. He just walked out one day and never came back. My mom, she tried to hold everything together, but it wasn't enough. We struggled to make ends meet." James nodded but didn't interrupt, his eyes steady and attentive. Emma looked down at her hands. "By the time I was in high school, I'd already decided college wasn't for me. We couldn't afford it. And honestly, I didn't see the point. What was the point of dreaming about something I'd never have? So I got a job at a diner in town, working the graveyard shift to help pay the bills." Her voice grew bitter. "But no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Rent kept going up, groceries cost more, and medical bills piled up when my mom got sick. It felt like the whole world was stacked against us." James leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "And after high school?" Emma hesitated, then shrugged. "More of the same, job after job. None of them paid well, and most of them treated me like I was disposable. Customers yelling at me, bosses threatening to fire me over the smallest mistakes. It all just added up." She paused, her throat tightening. "And then last year, my mom passed away. Cancer. She didn't have insurance, so I'm still paying off the hospital bills. After that, it was like something broke inside me." Emma met James's gaze, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I've been angry for so long. At my dad for leaving us. At my mom for getting sick. At the world for making everything so damn hard. And at myself for not being able to fix any of it." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. James remained quiet, letting her story settle before speaking. "That's a heavy burden to carry," he said finally. "And it's no wonder you feel the way you do. But, Emma, anger like that, it can either fuel change or it can destroy you. What happened at the cafe wasn't just about me. It was about all the pain you've been holding inside." Emma looked away, ashamed. "I don't know how to fix it." "You start by taking responsibility," James said, his tone firm but compassionate. "What you did was wrong, and you need to own that. But responsibility doesn't mean carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It means recognizing your choices and making better ones moving forward. Emma frowned, unsure. But how? How do I just stop being angry? You don't stop, James replied. You channel it. Anger can be a powerful motivator if you let it push you towards something constructive instead of destructive. But you need help to get there. Emma looked up at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. Help. James reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the desk to her. This is a resource guide. Counseling services, financial aid programs, job training centers. You're not alone in this, Emma. There are people and organizations that can help. You just have to be willing to take the first step. Emma hesitated before picking up the folder. She flipped through it, the words blurring together as her mind raced. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. I threw coffee on you. I humiliated you. Why do you care? James's gaze softened. Because I've seen what happens when people like you don't get the help they need. Anger turns into resentment, resentment turns into hatred, and hatred turns into actions you can't take back. You're at a crossroads, Emma. You can either let this moment define you, or you can use it to change your life. Emma swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also seen. For the first time in years, someone was offering her more than judgment or pity. They were offering her a chance. That evening, Emma sat in her apartment, the folder open on the coffee table. She had spent hours reading through the materials, her emotions swinging between hope and doubt. Could she really do this? Could she change? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a notification from the counseling center James had recommended. She had filled out the online intake form earlier but hadn't expected such a quick response. The message read, "Thank you for reaching out. Your first appointment is scheduled for Thursday at 2:00 p.m. We look forward to working with you." Emma stared at the screen, her heart pounding. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. For the first time, she felt like she was doing something, not just reacting to life's challenges, but actively trying to change. The next day, James Carter sat in his office, reviewing reports. His assistant, Ramirez, entered with a clipboard. "Director, an update on Emma Lee," he said, handing over the notes. James skimmed the document, his lips curving into a faint smile. "She's already contacted the counseling center," Ramirez said, "and she signed up for a financial literacy workshop next week." James nodded, pleased. "Good. Let's keep an eye on her progress. But from a distance. She needs to do this on her own." Ramirez hesitated. "Director, if I may, why are you so invested in her? I know she's had a rough life, but there are thousands of people like her. Why this one?" James leaned back in his chair, his expression contemplative. "Because, Ramirez, sometimes it only takes one person to break the cycle. If she can turn her life around, she'll inspire others to do the same. And maybe, just maybe, we can create a ripple effect." Ramirez nodded, understanding. "Understood, sir." Emma's first counseling session was nerve-wracking, but also cathartic. Her counselor, Dr. Elaine Harris, was kind but direct, guiding Emma through the tangled mess of her emotions. For the first time, Emma felt like she had a roadmap, tools to manage her anger, strategies to rebuild her confidence, and a plan for the future. Over the next few weeks, Emma began to see small but meaningful changes. She attended workshops, started budgeting her finances more carefully, and even reconnected with an old friend who offered her a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't much, but it was a start. One evening, as she was leaving the bookstore, she noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. James Carter, dressed in a dark coat, gave her a small nod before disappearing into the crowd. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't know why he had chosen to help her, but she was determined to prove him right. A new direction. 2 months had passed since Emma's fateful meeting with James Carter. For the first time in years, Her life felt like it was moving forward instead of spiraling out of control. The anger she had carried for so long still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She was learning to manage it, to understand it, and most importantly, to channel it into something constructive. Her days had taken on a new rhythm. Mornings were spent at the bookstore, where she worked part-time shelving books, assisting customers, and managing inventory. The quiet atmosphere and the scent of old pages were oddly soothing. Afternoons were reserved for counseling sessions with Dr. Harris, who had become a crucial part of Emma's transformation. Evenings were a mix of workshops, volunteer shifts, and personal time, where she often sat with a journal, reflecting on her progress. It was during one such evening that Emma received an unexpected call. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number, and she hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said cautiously. "Miss Lay," came a familiar, calm voice. "This is James Carter." Emma sat up straighter, her heart racing. "Director Carter. Hi. I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I imagine not," he replied. "But I've been following your progress. Dr. Harris mentioned you've been making significant strides." Emma's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and embarrassment. "I'm trying," she said simply. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm doing my best." "That's all anyone can ask for," James said. "The reason I'm calling is because I have an opportunity for you, something that could help you take the next step." Emma frowned, intrigued. "What kind of opportunity?" "There's a community initiative I've been supporting," James explained. "It's focused on bridging divides and addressing systemic issues at the local level. They're looking for people with real-life experience, people who've faced adversity and come out the other side, to join their advisory board. I think you'd be a valuable addition." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Me? On a board? I don't know anything about that kind of thing." "You know more than you think," James said firmly. "This isn't about credentials. It's about perspective. Your journey is exactly the kind of story that can inspire change." Emma hesitated, doubt creeping in. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." "No one ever feels ready," James said, his tone softening. "But sometimes the best way to grow is to step outside your comfort zone. Think about it. The decision is yours." Before she could respond, James added, "I'll email you the details. Take your time and let me know what you decide." "Okay," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "Good luck, Emma," James said before hanging up. Emma stared at her phone, her mind racing. The idea of joining a board, a group of people who would undoubtedly be more educated and experienced than her, felt daunting. But the thought of making a real difference, of using her story to help others, stirred something inside her. The following week, Emma attended her first meeting for the community initiative. The boardroom was modest but professional, with a long table surrounded by a diverse group of individuals. There were social workers, educators, local activists, and even a retired judge. Emma felt out of place at first, her anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. But as the meeting progressed, she realized that her perspective was valuable. When the group discussed issues like poverty, housing insecurity, and workplace discrimination, Emma's lived experiences provided insights that no one else could offer. By the end of the meeting, she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. "Emma," said Sophia Morales, the program director, as the meeting wrapped up, "you brought up some excellent points today. I can tell you're going to be an asset to this team." Emma smiled shyly. "Thank you. I wasn't sure if I'd fit in here." Sophia placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're exactly where you need to be. Don't underestimate the power of your story." As Emma continued to attend meetings and contribute to the initiative, her confidence grew. She began speaking at local events, sharing her journey and advocating for programs that addressed the root causes of the struggles she had faced. Her speeches were raw and authentic, resonating with audiences in a way that statistics and reports couldn't. One evening, after a particularly successful event, she spotted James Carter in the audience. He was leaning against the back wall, his arms crossed, watching her with a small, approving smile. When the event ended, Emma made her way over to him. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said, a teasing note in her voice. "I wanted to see how you were doing," James replied. "And I wasn't disappointed. You've come a long way, Emma." Emma's cheeks flushed. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your help." James shook his head. "You did this yourself. I just gave you a push." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared journey hanging between them. Finally, James spoke again. "What's next for you?" Emma thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'm not sure, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have options, and that's enough for now." Over the next few months, Emma's life continued to transform. She became a respected voice in her community, her story serving as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. She worked tirelessly to ensure that others had access to the resources and support she had once struggled to find. James kept tabs on her progress, occasionally checking in or attending one of her events. Each time he saw her, he was reminded of the power of resilience and the importance of giving people a chance to change. One evening, as Emma prepared for another speaking engagement, she received a text from James. "Proud of you. Keep going." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But she also knew she wasn't the same person she had been that day in the cafe. She was stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she stepped onto the stage, the applause of the audience washing over her, Emma realized something profound. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The ripple effect. The packed auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Emma stood behind the podium. The spotlight cast a warm glow on her, illuminating the woman she had become, a stark contrast to the frazzled waitress from months ago. Her hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear, it was the weight of the moment. She looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces, young and old, each one waiting for her to speak. She took a deep breath, clutching the edges of the podium. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady. "A little over a year ago, I was at the lowest point in my life. I was angry, lost, and filled with resentment. I didn't think I could change, and I certainly didn't believe I deserved a second chance." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. Emma glanced toward the back of the room, where James Carter stood, his arms crossed, his face unreadable, but his presence reassuring. "But someone saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself," Emma continued. "That man," she gestured subtly toward James, "gave me an opportunity to confront my anger, take responsibility for my actions, and turn my life around. And today, I stand before you not as a perfect person, but as someone who has chosen to keep growing, to keep learning, and to keep fighting for a better future, not just for myself, but for others." Applause erupted, filling the room with energy. Emma let it wash over her, a wave of validation for the hard work she had put into rebuilding her life. After the event, Emma mingled with the audience, exchanging handshakes and heartfelt conversations. People shared their own struggles and thanked her for her vulnerability. For the first time, Emma felt like her pain had a purpose. As the crowd thinned, James approached her, his expression softer than usual. "You were remarkable tonight," he said, his tone warm. Emma smiled, still buzzing from the evening. "Thank you. I was terrified at first, but once I started speaking, it felt natural." "It's because you're speaking the truth," James said. "People can feel that." Emma nodded, then hesitated. "James, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Why did you decide to help me that day? You could have walked away, pressed charges, or just left me to deal with the consequences. But you didn't. Why?" James considered her question for a moment before answering. Because I've seen too many people let anger and pain consume them. And I've seen what happens when no one steps in to break the cycle. You reminded me of someone I once knew, someone who didn't get the chance you did. Emma tilted her head, intrigued. Who? James's eyes flickered with something. Pain, perhaps. My sister. She went through a lot of what you described. Our father left. Our family struggled, and she carried so much anger. But no one reached out to her, and she didn't know how to ask for help. She didn't make it. Emma's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. James shook his head. I can't change the past, but I can make sure that others don't fall through the cracks the way she did. When I met you, I saw someone who was hurting, but who still had the strength to change. I couldn't ignore that. Emma swallowed hard, her throat thick with emotion. Thank you, she said softly, for believing in me. James gave her a small smile. You've earned it. In the weeks that followed, Emma threw herself even deeper into her work. She joined more community initiatives, helped organize local outreach programs, and even started mentoring young adults who were struggling with their own challenges. Her days were long and often exhausting, but they were fulfilling in a way she had never experienced before. One afternoon, while volunteering at a youth center, Emma met a teenage girl named Maya. Maya was shy, with a sharp wit hidden behind layers of guardedness. She reminded Emma of herself at that age, angry, lost, and unsure of where to turn. During a break, Emma sat down with Maya, handing her a cup of hot cocoa. You've got a lot on your mind, Emma said gently. Maya shrugged, staring into her cup. What makes you think that? Emma smiled. Because I've been where you are, and I can tell you're carrying more than you're letting on. Maya glanced at her, her expression skeptical. You don't know me. You're right, Emma said, but I'd like to. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. For the rest of the afternoon, Maya remained quiet, but Emma noticed her lingering nearby, listening to her conversations with other volunteers. It was a small step, but Emma knew better than anyone that small steps could lead to big changes. One evening, Emma received a call from Sophia Morales, the director of the community initiative. Emma, we have an incredible opportunity, and we think you're the perfect person for it, Sophia said. What is it? Emma asked, curious. The city council is forming a task force to address systemic poverty and inequality, Sophia explained. They're looking for someone who can bring a grassroots perspective, someone who's lived through these challenges and can speak to what's really needed. I recommended you. Emma's heart skipped a beat. The city council. I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that. You're more than qualified, Sophia said firmly. You've proven that you can turn adversity into action. This is your chance to make an even bigger impact. Emma hesitated. The idea of working with city officials and policymakers was intimidating, but the thought of using her voice to create real change was exhilarating. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. A month later, Emma sat in a city council chamber, her nameplate in front of her. Emma Lee, community representative. The room was filled with influential figures, but Emma held her own, sharing her insights with confidence and clarity. After the meeting, a council member approached her. Ms. Lee, your perspective was invaluable today, he said. We need more voices like yours in these discussions. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Thank you. I'm just glad I could contribute. James Carter continued to watch Emma's journey from a distance, his faith in her unwavering. One afternoon, he received a handwritten note in the mail. It was from Emma. ***, Director Carter. Thank you for seeing the potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. You gave me a chance, and that chance changed my life. I hope I'm making you proud. Gratefully, Emma Lee ***. James read the note twice, a rare smile spreading across his face. He folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that change lives. The deepening impact. Emma's involvement with the City Council's task force became a defining chapter of her life. The meetings were intense, often lasting hours, and required her to navigate political discussions, community tensions, and bureaucratic hurdles. But Emma thrived in the challenge. Every time she sat at the long table, facing the council members and community leaders, she reminded herself of why she was there, to be a voice for those who had none. One day, during a particularly heated debate about reallocating city funds to support low-income housing, Emma found herself at the center of the discussion. "This isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet," she said, her voice firm but passionate. "These are families, people who are one paycheck away from losing everything. I know what that feels like because I've lived it. We can't keep turning a blind eye and pretending that this doesn't affect all of us." The room fell silent. For a moment, Emma wondered if she had overstepped. But then a senior council member spoke up. "She's right," he said, his tone reflective. "We've been focusing on short-term fixes for too long. It's time we take real, meaningful action." The motion passed unanimously, and Emma felt a surge of pride. It was a small victory, but it represented the kind of change she had dreamed of when she first started this journey. Outside the council chambers that evening, Emma ran into Maya, the teenage girl she had met at the youth center. Maya had started attending some of the council meetings, initially just to observe, but now as a budding advocate in her own right. "Hey, Miss Lee," Maya said, her tone shy but warm. Emma smiled. "Just Emma, remember. What brings you here?" "I wanted to see how these meetings work," Maya said, shrugging. "And I guess I wanted to thank you for believing in me." Emma's heart swelled. "I'm proud of you, Maya. You're already doing incredible things." Maya looked down, hiding a small smile. "Thanks. I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in." "You'll find your place," Emma said. "And when you do, you'll make a bigger difference than you can imagine." Back at home that night, Emma reflected on how far she had come. Her once cramped apartment now felt brighter, not because of any physical changes, but because of the sense of purpose she had found. She had paid off most of her debts, her relationships were stronger, and she had built a network of people who supported and believed in her. Yet, as fulfilling as her life had become, Emma still carried the weight of her past. She decided it was time to confront the part of her life she had avoided for years. Her father. Emma hadn't spoken to her father since he left when she was 7. She had no idea where he was or what kind of life he was living. But something James had said during one of their conversations stuck with her. Healing isn't just about moving forward. It's about making peace with what's behind you. She began her search online, piecing together fragments of information. After weeks of searching, she found an address in a nearby town. Her heart raced as she debated whether to reach out. Finally, she decided to write him a letter. ***, Dad. It's been a long time. I'm not sure if you'll even read this, but I wanted to try. I've been through a lot since you left, and for years, I blamed you for everything that went wrong in my life. But I've learned that holding onto that anger doesn't help. It just keeps the wounds open. I'm not writing to blame you or demand answers. I'm writing to let you know that I found peace, and I hope you have too. If you'd like to talk, here's my number. If not, I understand. Emma ***. She mailed the letter and waited. Days turned into weeks, and just as she was starting to lose hope, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, Emma." The voice on the other end was deep and unfamiliar, but she knew immediately who it was. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Is this Dad?" "It's me," he said, his tone cautious. "I got your letter. I didn't think you'd ever want to hear from me." Emma took a deep breath. "I didn't think I would either. But I've learned a lot about forgiveness, and I realized that holding on to the past wasn't helping me. I wanted to know if you're okay." There was a long pause before he replied. "I'm okay. I've made a lot of mistakes, Emma, and leaving you and your mom was the biggest one. I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "Maybe we can meet sometime. Start over." "I'd like that," he said, his voice breaking. "I'd really like that." Their first meeting was awkward but honest. They talked about the years they had missed, the pain they had both carried, and the possibility of building a new relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward healing, a step Emma never thought she would take. James Carter learned of Emma's reconciliation through a casual conversation during one of their check-ins. When she told him, his face lit up with genuine pride. "That's a big step," he said. "It takes courage to face the past like that." Emma smiled. "I wouldn't have had the strength to do it without everything you taught me." "You had it in you all along," James replied. "You just needed someone to remind you." Emma's journey was far from over, but she no longer faced it with fear or anger. She faced it with hope, determination, and the knowledge that even the hardest battles could lead to something beautiful. The ripple effect of her transformation continued to spread, touching lives she might never meet, and as she walked her path, she carried with her the lesson James had taught her, that even in the darkest moments, there is a chance for light. The legacy of change. The City Council chamber buzzed with activity as the task force prepared to deliver their final recommendations on poverty alleviation and community support. Emma sat near the front of the room, her nameplate reflecting the bright overhead lights. Emma Lee, Community Representative. This meeting was the culmination of months of tireless work, countless debates, and a level of collaboration Emma had never imagined possible. The chairperson called the meeting to order. Today, we'll hear from Emma Lee, who has been instrumental in bringing a lived perspective to our discussions. Ms. Lee, the floor is yours. Emma stood, smoothing her blouse as she approached the podium. Her heart raced, but she had learned to channel that energy into her words. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady. "Over the past year, I've had the privilege of working with this incredible task force. What we've accomplished together isn't just a list of recommendations. It's a blueprint for a better future, a future where no one has to endure what I and so many others have faced." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "We've identified the gaps in our systems, the places where people fall through the cracks. And today, we're presenting actionable steps to fill those gaps. Affordable housing initiatives, accessible job training programs, mental health services, and support for working families. These aren't just policies, they're lifelines." The room erupted into applause as Emma stepped back from the podium. Her chest swelled with pride, but she knew this was only the beginning. Implementing these changes would require relentless effort, and she was ready to fight for it. After the meeting, as the council members and task force dispersed, Emma lingered near the chamber's exit. James Carter approached, his signature calm demeanor unchanged. "That was impressive," he said, offering her a rare smile. "You've become quite the leader." Emma smiled back. "I had a good mentor." James shook his head. "You did this on your own, Emma. You've taken every opportunity and turned it into something extraordinary. I couldn't be prouder." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't downplay his words as she might have in the past. Instead, she accepted them with gratitude. "Thank you. That means a lot." In the weeks that followed, Emma's influence continued to grow. She was invited to speak at conferences, collaborate with nonprofits, and even advise local policymakers. Her name became synonymous with resilience and advocacy, and her story inspired countless others to take action in their own lives. One day, Emma received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "TDH Conference Invitation. Dear Ms. Lee, we've been following your incredible work and believe your story would make a powerful addition to our upcoming TDX conference. We'd be honored if you would share your journey and insights with our audience. Warm regards, Dr. Nadia Thompson, TDX organizer." Emma stared at the screen, her emotions a whirlwind. Speaking on such a prominent stage was both terrifying and exhilarating. After taking a deep breath, she typed her response. "I'd be honored." On the day of the TEDx talk, Emma stood backstage, her hands clammy as she rehearsed her opening lines. The auditorium was filled with hundreds of people, and cameras streamed the event to thousands more online. She took a deep breath, recalling Dr. Harris's advice. "You've already lived the hardest parts of your story. Telling it is the easy part." When the announcer called her name, Emma stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She took her place behind the iconic red dot and smiled at the audience. "Good evening," she began. "My name is Emma Lee, and a little over a year ago, I was a waitress who thought her life was over." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. But that moment, the lowest of my life, turned out to be the beginning of something extraordinary. Today, I want to share how a single second chance transformed my life and how it can transform others too. As Emma spoke, the audience was silent, hanging on every word. She recounted her journey, from the anger and hopelessness that had consumed her to the pivotal encounter with James Carter that set her on a new path. She spoke about the importance of accountability, resilience, and the power of community. "And here's the truth I've learned," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "We all have the capacity to change, not just ourselves, but the world around us. Change starts with a choice. It starts with believing that the life you want is worth fighting for." When she finished, the auditorium erupted into applause. Emma felt a swell of emotion as she stepped back, tears glistening in her eyes. She had turned her pain into purpose, and now she was helping others do the same. As Emma's TEDx talk gained traction online, her inbox filled with messages from people around the world. Some shared their own struggles, while others thanked her for giving them hope. Emma read each message, humbled by the impact her story was having. One message, however, stood out. It was from a woman named Janine, who lived in a small town hundreds of miles away. "Dear Emma, I watched your TEDx talk, and I cried through the whole thing. Your story is my story. Abandonment, struggle, anger. But until now, I didn't think it was possible to change. You've shown me that it is. I'm reaching out because I need help taking the first step. I want to be better, for myself and my kids. Thank you for giving me hope. Sincerely, Janine." Emma's heart ached as she read the message. She responded immediately, offering words of encouragement and resources to help Janine get started. It reminded her of the ripple effect James had talked about, how one act of kindness could inspire countless others. Months later, Emma stood in front of a group of teenagers at the youth center where she now worked part-time as a mentor. Maya, now a confident young woman, sat beside her, helping lead the discussion. "Your past doesn't define you," Emma told the group. "Your choices do, and every day, you have the power to make new choices, choices that lead to the life you want." The teenagers listened intently, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and skepticism. Emma smiled, recognizing the uncertainty in their expressions. She had been there once too. James Carter continued to follow Emma's progress, though their interactions grew less frequent. One day, he received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of Emma speaking at the TEDx conference, along with a handwritten note. ***, Director Carter. This is where your belief in me has led. Thank you for being the spark that lit the fire. Forever grateful. Emma ***. James placed the photo on his desk, a reminder that even the smallest acts of compassion could create legacies of change. As Emma's journey continued, she carried with her the lessons she had learned. That accountability and forgiveness could coexist, that growth required courage, and that every story, no matter how broken, had the power to inspire others. Her life was no longer defined by her mistakes, but by the choices she made every day to rise above them. And for Emma Lee, the best was yet to come. The culmination of a journey. Months after her TEDx talk went viral, Emma's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. Her voice was no longer just a whisper in the margins. It had become a powerful call for change, resonating with people across the world. She had received invitations to speak at conferences, schools, and community events, and she was actively working with the City Council's task force to implement long-term changes for underserved populations. But even as her influence grew, Emma remained grounded. She continued to mentor Maya and the other teenagers at the youth center, pouring her energy into helping them find their own paths. Her bond with Maya deepened, and the young girl blossomed under her guidance, becoming a fierce advocate for youth rights. One evening, Emma was preparing for a major conference where she would deliver the keynote address. She sat in her apartment, surrounded by notes and drafts, when her phone buzzed. It was James Carter. "Director Carter," she said, smiling as she answered. "To what do I owe the honor?" James chuckled. "Emma, you can call me James by now. I just wanted to check in. I saw the lineup for the conference tomorrow. Keynote speaker. That's a big deal." "It is," she admitted. "I'm nervous, but I'm excited too." "You'll do great," James said confidently. "I know you will." Emma hesitated. "James, I've been meaning to say something. I don't think I ever properly thanked you. Not just for giving me a second chance, but for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You changed my life." There was a pause on the other end before James replied, his voice softer. "Emma, I didn't change your life. You did that. I just gave you the opportunity. And watching you grow into the person you are now has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career." Emma felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The next day, the conference hall was packed. Emma stood backstage, listening to the hum of the crowd. She took a deep breath, clutching the microphone in her hand. This wasn't just a speech. It was the culmination of her journey, a testament to everything she had overcome. As she stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. She smiled, feeling the energy of the room, and began. 2 years ago, I was a woman consumed by anger. I thought the world had given up on me, and I had given up on myself. But one moment, one act of compassion, changed everything. It reminded me that even in the darkest times, there's a spark of hope waiting to be ignited. She recounted her story with honesty and vulnerability, weaving her personal struggles into a broader message about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of community. "My journey wasn't easy," she said, her voice steady. "But it taught me that change is always possible. And now, I stand here not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who knows the value of taking that first step." The audience gave her a standing ovation, and Emma felt tears sting her eyes as she soaked in the moment. This wasn't just her victory. It was a shared triumph, a reminder that transformation was possible for anyone willing to fight for it. After the conference, Emma found James waiting for her in the lobby. He greeted her with a rare, genuine smile. "You were extraordinary," he said. "I hope you realize just how many lives you've touched." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. "I wouldn't be here without you." James shook his head. "You've earned every bit of this, Emma, and I have no doubt that you'll keep earning it." As they parted ways, Emma felt a quiet certainty settle over her. She had come so far, but her journey wasn't over. There were still battles to fight, voices to amplify, and lives to touch. Epilogue. A legacy of light. Years later, Emma Lay was a household name, known for her tireless advocacy and groundbreaking work in community development. She founded an organization dedicated to empowering marginalized individuals, providing them with the resources and support they needed to build better lives. Her mentorship program expanded, helping hundreds of young people like Maya find their paths. Maya herself had gone on to become a prominent advocate, often crediting Emma as the person who changed her life. James Carter retired from his position as director of the Federal Intelligence Bureau, but he remained an advisor to Emma's organization. The two shared a bond that went beyond mentor and mentee, It was a friendship built on mutual respect and a shared belief in the power of change. Emma's story became a beacon of hope for millions, proving that even the most broken paths could lead to something extraordinary. Her life was a testament to resilience, a reminder that second chances could create ripples of transformation that stretched far beyond one individual. And as Emma stood on yet another stage, addressing a room full of eager faces, she knew one thing for certain. Her journey wasn't just her own. It was a gift to the world, a light that would continue to shine long after her words had faded.